said, good afternoon. All right, that's more like it. It's almost opening day. All right. On behalf of the St. Louis Cardinals, I'd like to welcome everyone here today. And what a beautiful day it is. We're all anxious for our favorite day of the year, which is opening day at Busch Stadium, which is, I don't know if you know it, now is happening on Friday. But we're here in the Grove neighborhood today to honor my good friend, the legendary Mr. Bob Gibson. And we are so thankful that he's able to join us here for this special honorary street naming event. You know, in 1968, they lowered the mound. And now, in his honor, or because of him, and now today they're naming a street after him. Were you that good? Well deserved, my friend. To help us mark this special occasion, we have representatives from the St. Louis Cardinals, Park Central Development, and the neighborhood residents who started this petition. Also here today, we have representatives from our city, state, and federal elected officials. Please welcome Congressman from Lacey Clay's office, his communications director, Mr. Stephen Engelhardt, and on behalf of Senator Roy Blunt's office, his district director, Martha Beth Luna Wolf. How you doing, man? There you go.
Good afternoon, everyone, and bringing you greetings from Washington. Mr. Gibson, the congressman, said that he is meeting the Secretary General of NATO today. He'd much rather be here. And he asked me to relay us an actual true story from when he was 12 years old, working at the famous Wilson Shoeshine Parlor at Lambert Field. And apparently the Cardinals frequented that shoeshine parlor, and he was in the habit of collecting autographs. And he said that everyone was most compliant except for you, who always told him the same thing: do your job, kid, we'll see how it goes. So that's a true story. Congressional honors. This was entered into the congressional record today. Sir, in your honor. Whereas Hall of Famer Bob Gibson is widely considered to be the greatest right-handed starting pitcher of his era, and whereas Bob Gibson showed enormous courage both on the field as a fierce competitor and off the field as he overcame vicious racism to establish his athletic dominance while also earning a leadership position inside the St. Louis Cardinals clubhouse, and whereas from 1961 to 1975, Bob Gibson compiled a career record of 251 wins, 174 losses, a career ERA of 2.91, recording 3,117 strikeouts and tossing 255 complete games, including 56 shutouts. And whereas Mr. Gibson was 7-2 in World Series play and was selected to the National League All-Star team 8 times, winner of 9 consecutive Gold Gloves, and whereas in 1968, during the fabled year of the pitcher, Bob Gibson recorded an astounding 1.12 ERA, leading the Cardinals back to the World Series, winning both the Cy Young Award and the National League Most Valuable Player. And whereas in 1981, Bob Gibson was elected to the Baseball Hall of Fame on the first ballot, and then was subsequently named to Major League Baseball's All-Century team, besides being an inaugural member of the Cardinals Hall of Fame. Now, therefore, I, William Lacey Clay, do hereby designate April 3, 2019 as Bob Gibson Day in the 1st Congressional District, conveying to him special congressional honors and congratulating him on this momentous occasion. Congratulations, Mr. Gibson.
Now I'd like to welcome the Honorable Lyta Cruson, the Mayor of St. Louis.
Thanks. Good afternoon. This is indeed a beautiful day for such a very honorable event. Ozzy, thank you so much for being here. And what an amazing opportunity to stand before each of you today for this very special ceremony. We all know what it means to bleed cardinal red. Yeah, there we go. Somebody's got the spirit there. And we know that Bob Gibson's remarkable contributions to the game and to this city make him an icon, worthy of being honored in this way, the Honorable Bob Gibson Way, right here in the city's Grove neighborhood. Special thanks to all the residents who started the petitions and make this possible. What a great idea. Whose idea was that? Let's see, show of hand. Whose idea was it? It was your idea? Awesome. That's terrific. Big round of applause. And of course, a special thanks to Alderman Joe Rohde, who, as always, supported their efforts. So join me now in welcoming Alderman Rohde with more on what this means to the neighborhood. Thank you all for having me here. It's an honor. This is one of the funnest things you get to do as mayor. Thank you. Joe?
Thank you, Mayor. What an honor to be up here with Ozzie Smith. What a great day today. Fun? Are we having fun today or what? I don't live on Gibson now, and I wasn't part of the original crew that came up with this idea, but I grew up on Gibson. I grew up about 6 or 8 houses down this way, and I was 10 years old in 1968. And the goal of this was actually for last fall, and that would have been the 50th anniversary of the season. Unfortunately, we're a little disappointed because the Cardinals didn't make the playoffs, and usually Mr. Gibson would have come back for the playoffs, and so the goal was to do this last October. My wife wanted to go ahead and give some advice to Bill DeWitt, if he was here today, on how that might have not happened again this year. Madam Mayor, I know that you get a lot of unsolicited advice in your job, but I think the only person in our region who probably gets more of it would be Bill DeWitt. And in any event, that didn't happen, so we had to kind of roll it back to this year. And we were so excited that Mr. Gibson agreed to join us as he's come back for the opening day. I just thought I'd take a minute. I grew up on Gibson. I want to tell you a little story about what it was like to be 10 years old for the younger people. In 1968, the Cardinals had just won in 67, and baseball was clearly in the air. Every morning in the summer of 68, the neighbors would come to our yard. Our garage had gotten torn down, so we had the biggest yard to play baseball in. And Brian Hughes from down the street, and Tommy Peterman is here today, I think, used to live up the street. Here's Tommy in the back. We're friends on Facebook. And we would come and we would play baseball in our backyard, and we would argue about who would play who in the Cardinals. And Brian Hughes would argue that since he's left-handed, he should lead off and play Lou Brock. And then Tommy Peterman would argue, since he lived at 4545 Gibson, he should go ahead and be Bob Gibson when it came time to pitch. So we would play out there all afternoon long. We'd hit the ball over the fence. We had a lot of characters in the neighborhood at the time. There was Mrs. Bryan across the alley. She was kind of like Eleanor Rigby. She wore her face that she kept in the jar by the door. Meanest lady in the neighborhood. She had a big dog in the backyard, and we called her the Old Crow when she wasn't around. We had 2 Old Crows. The other one was Sister Ellen Thomas, who was the principal down at St. Cronin's grade school. So when you said the Old Crow, you had to figure out, was it Sister Ellen Thomas or Mrs. Bryant? If you hit the ball over into Mrs. Bryant's yard, it was considered a home run because it was irretrievable because of the dog and her. So we lost many a baseball in Mrs. Bryant's yard, but it was just a fascinating time. Everybody was talking baseball. I used to go to bed at night on the West Coast games, and I would hear the announcer announce the games in Candlestick Park, and I'd be sitting there with my little earpiece and my little transistor so my parents wouldn't catch me. And I'd always wonder about Candlestick Park because they talk about the wind and the baseballs, and I'd always be in there rooting that Bob Gibson could not, that they couldn't hit his ball because if it got up high enough, it'd be, you never knew what was going on out there. But it was a phenomenal time. On Fridays was allowance day in the neighborhood, and all the parents would give their kids a nickel. And we would run down to this little store down on the corner here, which was a little pharmacy back in the days, Myers Pharmacy, and they sold baseball cards there. And you would get, for a nickel, 5 baseball cards and a stale piece of gum. My brothers would beat it down there every week, and they couldn't remember a state capital but they would remember the absolute batting average of every baseball card we have. Unfortunately, when we were in our teens, my mom threw them all away. Otherwise, I wouldn't be working now. But it was a phenomenal time, and Bob Gibson, I was so, I guess, silly. My brothers who convinced me that Gibson was actually named after Bob Gibson back in those days, so I was a little not the brightest on the uptake, but baseball was in the air. It was really exciting, and everybody talked about it, and it was legendary. So when Phil Hague had contacted me and said that some of the neighbors were interested in doing this with this 50-year anniversary, and then I, you know, being a politician, trying to get out of work, trying to make it a little hard, I said, well, maybe, you know, and I got another email from Justin Perriman, and I put the two of them together, and of course we couldn't make it too easy. We had to make them go out and get petitions and everything, and they did all that. And it has been just a wonderful time. Before Phil comes up, I just want to say, you know, we live in a really divisive time right now, and it is, and I think about it a lot, and every time we start talking about stadiums and all that stuff, it gets kind of crazy, and I think about how important baseball is, though, in other ways. Certainly it's not like crime or housing or education, all those far more important issues. But it's kind of nice to know that we have something shared. When half the people in our country are getting things from Fox and the other half are CNN, it's kind of nice to know that almost everybody in the St. Louis region knew that April was here when a guy by the name of Ozzie did a flip, when baseball legends came back like Bob Gibson and marched in a parade behind Clydesdales. And it's nice to know that from April to October every year, that when you stand in line in a gas station or around a water cooler, doesn't matter what your race is, what your sex is, your sexual orientation, it doesn't matter what job you have or anything else, but you have an instant connection by just saying, what do you think about the cards? And I think that's something that baseball does for us. It's something that sports does for us. And it's great that we have a great ownership team and a great tradition here in St. Louis. With that, I'd like to introduce Judge Phil Hague, who really kind of took this thing and ran with it. Judge?
Hello. Nice to meet you. Good afternoon to all of you. Welcome to everybody, to Bob Gibson and his family. Special welcome from the people here in St. Louis, and to Ozzie Smith and all the people who are here on behalf of the St. Louis Cardinals. Thank you for pitching in to make this happen. I want to talk to you about two things, just very briefly, and the first one is, how did this come to be? There were a lot of people who did things at one point or another, but I had some conversations with my next door neighbor, Sean Collins. We were trying to remember exactly how long ago that was. It's been a while. We agreed to that much. And I want to thank Sean for helping me get this idea started. Sean Collins, thank you. We'd talk from time to time. Finally, there was a meeting at the Park Central office down on Manchester. Justin Perriman was there. Justin, are you here? Thank you for all your work in this event. Joe Rohde was there, and Abdullah, who's the head of Park Central, was there, and we sat and talked. And Joe said, you know, I'm in favor of this, but what you have to know is, to change a street name in the city of St. Louis, you have to get at least 75% of the people who live on that block or that street to agree. So we said, okay, the job's on us. We wrote up petitions. The people at Park Central helped us with that. And we went out and started going door to door. This was in October and very beginning of November of last year. And there were lots of things in the air then, just like there are now, just as Joe Rohde said, things that divide people. But we started knocking on doors. Rhonda Porter helped me again and again. Rhonda, are you here? And in addition to Rhonda, Daryl Dixon. Daryl, you're here, I know. Yes, thank you. And we went door to door. And what really, it didn't exactly surprise me, but what really pleased me was to see that everybody was in favor of this idea of renaming Gibson Avenue for Bob Gibson. It was something that almost everybody knew about. The people who didn't know, we gave them a flyer. They read about Bob and they said, yes, let's do this. So we got over 80% of the people living from the 4200 block to the 4500 block of Gibson to sign that petition. We turned the petitions back to Park Central. Park Central gave them to Joe Rohde. The process went through. The Board of Aldermen passed the law. Mayor Cruson signed it. And so we now have Bob Gibson Way on Gibson Avenue. So a lot of people and a lot of thanks. The second thing I want to talk about, I've touched on already, and I just want to reiterate that the response from this neighborhood was really overwhelming in favor of making Gibson Avenue in honor of Bob Gibson. And I just want to emphasize to all of you, we've got a lot of differences, but this was a way to pull us all into a common cause. And I was really pleased to see how people did that. Let me finish by mentioning one final note. Scientists say that human beings are about 99% the same and about 1% different. In his years, before, during, and after playing baseball as a St. Louis Cardinal, I think Bob Gibson paid a big price for that 1%. But he didn't let that 1% stop him. He didn't let the 99% stop him. I never saw Bob Gibson give up. I never saw him give in, whether it was the 1% that he was dealing with or the 99%. So today, we honor Bob Gibson by renaming our street and for giving us his example of how to be human beings to one another and never give up. Thank you.
I'd like to introduce Abdul Kaba Abdullah. Come on up. How you doing? See you.
Well, first of all, it's great to see the community out here. Everyone, you look absolutely awesome, so if you just give yourself a round of applause, that would be great. So just very quickly, I won't be up here before you long, but growing up, my dad always talked about Bob Gibson and just the example of who Bob Gibson was in 1968 doing civil rights and just the dignity that he gave America and particularly the African American community of what it meant to have dignity and to be a man. My dad loved Westerns. He loved Westerns. And he said, John Wayne is the baddest man I've ever met, but God created Bob Gibson so that John Wayne could have somebody to look up to. So before us today, I won't talk much longer, but I did want to just hit on one small point on what the renaming of a street can do. We always brand neighborhoods when you go in. People go into the Central West End because there are great things happening. People go into the Grove and Forest Park Southeast because they have a good name and great things are happening. So this street of Gibson, we're looking forward to making it brand this neighborhood for not only the dignity that this community will have, but also that good things are happening and good things are coming. So this is also a sign of things to come. And just very briefly, I was talking with Harinder Singha, who owns the park that we're in, as well as the building across the street. And one of the things when I let him know what was going on with the renaming, he said, "This is great." He said, "One of the having this name, having been here on Bob Gibson, we have a new project that we want to do. Tech Artista will be renovating this historic building behind us and putting 10 new artist units back behind us, as well as renovating the sanctuary of this building for either a co-working space or a tenant anchor to help with the further revitalization of this community." So with that being said, we're thankful that it's on Bob Gibson Way. And Harinder said, what a better place for it to be. So with that being said, I just want to thank you for just being a great example, not only to my dad, who I looked up to, but if my dad looked up to someone, then you're someone who I definitely want to look up to as well, and I appreciate the example. And with that being said, thank you. The last thing that I do want to do is I would like to offer everyone to come back to Urban Chestnut. They have said if anyone wants to come back, have a beer together afterwards, they'd be more than welcome to host us. So please feel free to head back to Urban Chestnut. And thank you for being here. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Steve from the Mayor's Office. Thank you, Alderman Rhodey. And thank you to the Cardinal organization as well as our Board President of Park Central Development, Brian Phillips, Executive Director of Washington University Medical Center's Redevelopment Corp. Thank you.
Thank you, Abdul. And I'd like to thank each and every one of our speakers that were here today. Now, I guess it's about time. You know, Bob is a man of very few words. Would you like to say something? He's mumbling as he goes. And then of course, I'm going to have to give him time to go back here to do the unveiling. So the mic is yours, and don't hit me.
Well, I wasn't originally supposed to be a speaker, and so I'm not going to speak. But there's no way I could not come up here and thank everybody concerned for making this day possible. I was here a long time, I heard him say, the alderman say 1961. I wasn't an alderman, it was 1959 until 1975. And I am proud to say that I have seen a lot of changes. Things are altogether different today than they were back in 1959, and I mean for the better. It's been great to be able to be here, to be alive long enough to see the changes, and I saw every one of them. And in fact, I was part of some of it. Not too. You probably don't want to know about it, but I made some changes myself.
I'd say.
And it had nothing to do with baseball. But I do want to thank the community for thinking that I've done enough in this area in the city of St. Louis to honor me in this way, and it's really great. It's a great feeling. I don't know that I can explain to you what the great feeling is, because it is. It's wonderful. And I always consider St. Louis as my second home, and fastly it might become my first home. But thank you for everything. I want to thank the Cardinal organization. They have been wonderful to me. A little bit different than what it used to be also. And they never forget the old guys, and I'm really appreciative of that. Thank you very much, everybody.
Make your way over there. Why don't you make your way over there? I know it's going to take a few minutes, but as we get ready to close the program, I'd like to welcome the students from Life Arts Composition for Life Kids, who were so moved by Bob Gibson's life story that they wrote a song about him, and it's called Complete Gamer. So I'd like to welcome Christopher Johnson Mobley, Joshua Paco Lee, Daniel Long, Justice Mack, and Thomas Mack. And thank all of you for being here today, and we'll let them do their thing after we unveil here, okay? Okay. Everybody in place? Yeah. Get closer. You can get close. Get closer. Get closer. On three. 1, 2, 3. Gee. All right. All right. You guys can do your thing. All right.
Get up, stand up, put your hands up. From ghetto to glory, Bob Gibson been on a mission. Multiply the struggle and splitting it like division. Trying to make an image that was never up in this vision. Breaking down crime when you heard that final decision. Fatherless, poor and black, bitten on the earth by a rap. You can change poverty, that is a given fact. To rise above, that was his plan of attack. Bob Gibson, he did that.
He conquered the mound, the people around. Was shouting the crowds, the ambient sounds. The strike zone he found while bad as he clown had batter swinging like merry-go-rounds. He took him to town. He was a game changer, the complete gamer. Throw a pitch so fast it'll rearrange her. He's no stranger. Bob Gibson been on a mission. He changed the game forever. The pitcher was his position. He's the ultimate gamer. The game heavy, the opposition would never be ready. Game changer. Reach the top, champion blood running, something that can never be stopped. The big man coming, legendary fields got the crowd clutching their stomach. We all gotta face it, we are now witnessing greatness.
You're a complete gamer.
Define the era with the ERA, 1.12, and that was back in 68. Strikeouts over 3,000, innings with no hits, 22 2/3, that's as real as it gets. Lower the mound 5 inches.
Setting records, no Guinness. I'm a complete gamer, pitching all 9 innings, throwing the fastballs like Popeye off with the spinach. You know batters cower and fear when who step up to pitch it. I said, who? Gamer. The game heavy, the opposition will never be ready. Game changer. Reach the top, champion blood running, something that can never be stopped. The big man coming, legendary fields got the crowd clutching their stomach. We all gotta face it. We are now witnessing greatness.
You're a complete gamer.